All right, everyone, thanks for hopping on to Making Multifamily Money. So today I just want to talk briefly about a topic of how to talk to sellers after they reached out to you, by sending letters, cold calling, cold texting. And why I want to discuss this, because a lot of the students are kind of at the phase now where they're sending out letters and when you send out 300 letters a month, you typically get a 1 to 3% response rate. So that's about 3 to 10 responses. And basically, after letters come out, whether they do it themselves or I do it, the hard part is just to talk to the owners and build trust. So that seems to be the hardest point when I first started, and as expected, what the students are kind of struggling with today. And from personal experience, it takes repetition of just doing it. And for me, what I teach is you need to respond to the owner within 24 hours of when they reach out to you. Whether they call you, text you, email you, just respond and set up a call. And the point of the first call, which is the hardest point, is just to basically build trust. Like, if you get nothing out of the owner about the property, that's perfectly fine. But the key is just to get them on the phone as long as possible. About, for me, it's about 30 to 60 minutes. And you can quickly find out, if the owner is motivated or not. It gets really discouraging in the beginning because let's just say you have 10 people reach out, and out of the 10, you might have 1 to 2 who are really serious. A lot of people call. One of my students sent out letters, and they're kind of saying, "Hey, you're from California, screw you." So that's kind of the response that you may get. But obviously, those aren't serious sellers. They're not motivated. They're just being mean, for lack of a better word, and you can kind of quickly move on from those type of people that call. But you can basically really gauge kind of how the response is. And I see your hand there, Sarah. Maybe you can put a question in the comments, and I can get to it after this point. But basically, once they reach out, the point is to build trust. So I think the first question that I teach everybody is, so how long have you owned the property? And it's a good icebreaker you can do. Oh yes, it's uploaded. Everything's uploaded to YouTube after the session. So typically, later today it'll be uploaded there. So check out my YouTube. And so kind of back to the story. Sorry for my ADHD. But basically, when they call, I just say, "Hey, how long have you owned the property?" And you just let them talk. Like, literally, they'll give you so much information. And the more they talk, the more they feel like, they feel heard. That's kind of weird human psychology. I only know this because I'm an introvert by nature. So my default is just to sit and listen. But a lot of people in real estate, they just love to talk about real estate, right? If you ask any real estate investor about their portfolio, they'll talk about it for days and days, especially if they own this property for 20, 30 years. And that's a lot of the owners that we target. So it's almost as if they're talking about their kid, right? Like, so they'll share like, "Hey, it's a 26 unit apartment complex. I own it. Owned it for 20 years. I've been self-managing the property." They'll kind of give you some high-level stuff, and from there you can kind of bounce off what they tell you. So typically for me, I want to know, okay, well, how many units are occupied? What's the occupancy? And why I ask for that is, if it's around 90%, you can get a traditional lender on it typically. And then another thing I like to ask is, how many 1-bedroom and 2-bedrooms and studios is it? And the reason for that is I want to know how to underwrite the deal, right? Because obviously the rent of a 2-bedroom and a 1-bedroom varies. I roughly want to know how much rent they're collecting a month and what their expense is. This part you might be kind of leery of because if you ask like 100 owners, like, "Hey, how are your collections?" All 100 will say it's great. But being in this business, um, with two apartment complexes and one mobile home park at this point, I know that's inaccurate, right? Like when I bought my first apartment, the owner said, "Yeah, I collect $10,000 a month." But when I took over, I had like four people stop paying me, like three people leave, and right there, my income dropped from 10,000 to like 7,000, right? So it might have been good when they owned the property, but once you take over, there's going to be a huge drop, right? So like if you're cash flowing $3,000 a month under your underwriting day one, and you have seven people leave, then you're not cash flowing anymore. You're breaking even and slightly negative. So, as for the income, obviously the expense, a lot of these owners, since they self manage, their expense that they report is a lot less than what you anticipate. Like I had owners tell me, like, "Oh, it's 30%," or like if I collect 10,000 a month, they said their expense is 3,000, which is 30%. And I already know, like, okay, you're self managing the property, you're probably doing your own maintenance. So if you do it yourself, it's cheap, right? But if you run it like a business, and like what I do, right? I still work full time, W-2. I'm in California, and my apartments are in Oklahoma, so there's no way I can like fix a toilet. It's gonna probably cost me more just to fly out there, and I don't want to do that. That's not why I buy real estate. So they'll say a 30% expense ratio, which may be true for them, but for you it's gonna be at least 50%. In Oklahoma it's 55% for me. That's pretty tried and true amongst my two apartment complexes. And then from there, basically you want to ask, and this is kind of how I phrase it, like, "Hey, my lender is going to ask for these two documents. Do you have them by chance?" And it's going to be a rent roll and a T12. So you don't want to make it seem like you want the information. You want to make it seem like the lender wants the information, because some people might feel uncomfortable giving to you because you're literally a stranger that sent a letter from California and they're in Oklahoma. So like it's very sensitive information. So I typically say, well, I need to, get this to my lender, and then you can share which lender it is, like whatever, Chase, Bank of the West, whatever that is. And it kind of helps about the trust that, like, I don't, need the information, but my lender does to finance this deal. So I kind of noticed that kind of lowered their guard a bit. And after that, I'm really gauging what their motivation is to sell. So there's two types of motivation. It's either pain or gain. So pain is, obviously the property is maybe not performing well, right? Like maybe they're self-managing it, and then maybe they got sick with a disability and they can't manage the property anymore. Or maybe, the father was managing the property, and he passed away, and the kids inherit it and they don't want to manage it anymore. That's pain. Maybe they just want to retire, and this was their nest egg. So, obviously once they retire, they don't want to do this anymore. They don't want to self-manage. That's pain, right? And then you have other sellers who want gain. So they don't mind managing the property and owning the asset. Maybe it's doing very well, but they're interested in, like, "Hey, give me a great price and I'll sell it." Right? That was especially prevalent in 2021 and 2022, or early 2022, when it was a hot seller's market. But in 2023 and moving forward, it's kind of shifting towards a buyer's market. So um, people still might want this high price, but given today's interest rates and given today's climate, they may not be able to get that price they got a year ago, early 2022. So creative financing is kind of the bridge where you can overpay a little bit as long as they give you good terms, right? So overpaying, then it's basically, like, if I'm overpaying you by $500,000 for this property, I'd want low percent down and probably low interest, because I'm already paying you the interest by overpaying for the property. So just going through that. And from there, once I kind of understand kind of um, the basics of what their motivation is to sell, what their pain points are, that's when you can kind of craft your offer. And then when you start talking to them moving forward, you kind of reiterate those pain points, right? Like if a guy wants to retire, I said, hey, I want to be able to help you to retire because you worked hard for the past 20 years and you deserve it. So let's make this a win-win situation where I can help you retire, but also get a, you know, cash flowing asset that will help me retire one day. Right. So it's just kind of building that trust. And where a lot of my students fall on this is it takes a lot of touches, unfortunately. Like you just can't have the first call and be like, oh, hey, let's sell it. It's done. I mean, actually, I've had one where that happened for me, but he was extremely motivated. But a lot of these people, they're older. They may not move as fast. So you just have to kind of, after every call that you make, say, hey, is it okay if I follow up with you in like 1 to 2 weeks and just give you a call or a text message? And you have to constantly follow up with them. And then you want to have a servant mindset, right? So how can I make it easier for you to give me what I want? So if they don't have a profit and loss statement, then I'm gonna be on the phone with them, right? And I will listen to them step by step. This is how much rent I collected in January. This is my expense. This is how much rent I got in February. This is my expense. And I'll create the profit and loss statement for them. And same thing with the rent roll, right? And then if you do that, it just builds so much trust and that, they just want to work with you. And kind of one thing that I learned recently was a lot of times I have the problem of putting my own mindset into other people. And that's like a big, big pitfall. Because like for me, I'm like, if I was trying to sell my apartment complex, I want maximum dollar. That's what I'm optimizing for, right? So because I think that way, I kind of project that into the seller, right? I think like, well, why did this guy sell to me? Like he can get so much more money if he maybe listed with a broker and put it on the market. But what I came to realize is a lot of these sellers, like, their primary motivation may not be the maximum amount of money. It just may be like, hey, I just want to know who is buying my property that I've 20 years and make sure that they're a good person, right? That's not optimizing for money, right? Or maybe they just don't want to work with a broker and they just find that annoying and it's not very personal. So as a result, they just want to go direct. So so basically the kind of the morals, you cannot project your own mindset and views into the seller and just ask questions and build trust to understand what their motivation pain points are. So that was the hardest part for me because I'm that way. That's my human nature. So that's kind of what led me to my success. Talking to these owners. I mean, for reference, I sent out probably 1,800 letters. I probably talked to about 150 owners. Now, those 150 owners, I had about 2 who were really motivated. And the signs that you're working with a motivated seller is that it's very easy to work with. It just flows like very fast. Like, hey, can I get this P&L statement? And they give it to you within a reasonable time. Can I get this T12? The rent roll, it really flows. And then I'll say, hey, let me have my lender look at it. And then sometimes they'll even text me, say, hey, so what did your lender say? And then I'll just say, hey, like this is what they said. They wouldn't finance it on this point. So that's just kind of, the experience I had. So it just really requires patience and really requires building trust. And, fortunately for me, I'm a pharmacy director. I'm a pharmacist by day at a hospital. And I'm just used to coming from a place of being a servant and trying to help people and patients. So I've been doing it for like 10 years. So it's very natural for me and how it translates over to my real estate career. Right. So I just had that fortune. And, obviously as a pharmacy director, I manage about 40 people underneath me. And it's just kind of this, soft skill that I honed and developed over time. So, it takes a lot of practice and just a lot of volume. And eventually you'll kind of find your natural, voice in trying to help people. So, that's just kind of been my experience where, people will send the same exact letter template as me. Like my students have my letter template. They have all the questions I ask, but just the way you ask the question the tone that you do it, and how you just communicate with them in a way that they feel heard, right? Like all these people just want to feel heard, or people in general. So if you can kind of hone that soft skill and do it, that's how you like close on deals. That's how my close rate was very high. Just by submitting 1,800 letters. I closed on 2 apartments and made $300,000 equity day one in the span of like 8 months. So um, so that's just kind of my spiel about how to talk to owners. Key message is just have patience, practice a lot of it, and just come with a servant mindset and listen. Like if you can do all those, um, you will get better at it, and you will build trust. So, and I guess now I want to kind of open it up to everyone here for any questions, because I just want to provide the maximum of value. And I already see a question in the comments from Sarah. So the best financing for a debt service coverage ratio. So most lenders want a debt service coverage ratio of greater than 1.25. Obviously with interest rates, being 7% versus like 4% when I bought it, you're going to need higher cash flow to hit that DSCR greater than 1.25. So, for me, I kind of set expectations up front with my sellers that, hey, like I didn't reject your deal. My lender rejected the deal because they want a debt service coverage ratio greater than 1.25. And literally I'll show them the calculations that the lender uses, because I don't want to make it about me versus you. I want it to be me and you working together against the bank. So I make the bank the bad guy, right? So I'll say, hey, like this is how the bank's going to underwrite it. I'm with you. I don't agree with it, but if we want bank financing, this is how it is going to look, right? So I'll do this a couple of times of like 3 to 5 to 10 lenders, and if they're all going to reject it, at that point, that's when I pitch creative financing. Even though I know from the get-go that's where I'm going to go, but I just kind of play the game to build the trust with the seller. So that's a great question there. Yeah, Ivan. So my first deal, I think I started sending letters in March, I believe, March of 2021. And I got my first deal under contract in, I think, June of 2021. So it's 3 months. But I would say that, and this was during COVID, right? So this was when it was really competitive. But honestly, I think I was lucky, to be honest. Um, I would say average, it's definitely, I'd say if you have a mindset of 12 months minimum, that's more realistic. Because I just don't like how a lot of people, and myself included, we just want that instant gratification and aren't patient, right? And I'm guilty of this too. Like this is just kind of the trend nowadays. But I got my first after 3 months, and then my second deal I got 8. I think I got it 8 months after my first deal, and it was from a letter I sent like probably like 6 months ago. So, the owner actually wrote me a letter back. So, I would say I was definitely lucky on those two. But like I said, if you can consistently send 300 letters a month for a year, I'm pretty sure that you can get a deal. But like you said, you have to respond to the owners immediately. You have to be tenacious in your follow up, and you basically have to develop and hone your soft skills, right? So my goal is I basically want on these calls my students to be like, hey, I sent a letter out, and this is how I talk to the owner. And I basically want to debrief with like my students about like, all right, how did the conversation go, and what can we do to make it better for the next one, right? That's kind of my ultimate goal about these sessions, is to kind of make it on that forum. But obviously it's gonna take time to get there. And why I do 300 letters a month is, I think it's pretty sustainable to do, about 3 to 10 calls a month, because if you work full-time W-2, I work full-time W-2 still. And you want to test your letter to see if how it does in the market. The letter template that I share, it worked in Oklahoma in 2021, but in 2022 or 2023, you might have slightly tweaked the letter. Next question is, for the underwriter who reviews a deal or no one. So I actually, at this point, because I've been doing real estate for a while now, I have probably about like 10 lenders that I work with and like 2 mortgage brokers that I work with. And typically I'll just shoot over the deal to them, what the purchase price is or the offer price is and the T12 and the rent roll. And then I'll usually ask, like, how do you underwrite the deal? And they'll tell you, oh, we assume whatever 8% interest, 25-year AM, and this is the expense they assume. So, that's what I typically do. And once they kind of tell me that, I already kind of know how it'll underwrite, and you can kind of work backwards, right? Like, if you know what the debt service coverage ratio is to hit 1.25, the income, the expense, you kind of work backwards to the purchase price and what the loan amount will be. So you might have to down a little bit more, but typically I will have my lender, underwrite it. Obviously I have an underwriting calculator, for all the students. It's just some basic calculator that calculates cash and cash return, and it calculates a debt service coverage ratio. So basically, typically when I present it to the underwriter, the lender, I will tell them out the gate, I underwrote it myself, and this is my debt service coverage ratio. They already know it has a hit of 1.25. Just working with a lot of lenders. If it's a local bank, they might want 1.35, with less down potentially. So question from Gary is, how do you have brush things off and not take it personal? Lots of calls and CRM, and how do you track my leads? So the first question is, how do you brush things off and not take it personal? It's a great question, and something that I've kind of been focusing on, I guess that's recently. I used to listen to a lot of real estate podcasts, but honestly, at this point, it's getting very repetitive, and they're kind of talking more about the mindset and not getting really the tactics. And at this point, I own 90 units, and nothing's really new to me for that most part. So I've been listening to a lot of like mindset stuff, and basically, like, what's the mindset of being a successful real estate investor and being an entrepreneur and owning a business. And a skill that I've learned is basically being consistent, right? Like, can you do something very consistently for a long period of time without much results, right? I'll give my social media, for example. I've been doing it for like 6 months, 1 video a day, and it's a slow grind, and I'm expecting to do this for like years before I see anything. And the other skill is patience and having the proper perception, right? And for me, it's kind of like, so if, like, for example, like people's judgment of me, right? So, obviously I can post that, hey, I own 90 units of real estate. A lot of people will say, hey, you're being cocky. You're being, arrogant. You're showing off. You're trying to flex, right? Like, I get a lot of those. I'll be honest. If I post on the forums, whatever, people come at me. And I think what I came to realize, as I've gotten, older and got more successful in real estate, is it's just a lot of people are projecting their own securities onto you, right? And once I kind of learned that, I actually feel kind of empathetic towards people who feel the need to have to put people down on social media or put people down to make themselves feel better, right? like I actually am empathetic of those people, and believe me, I've posted some stuff on, like, I think the White Coat Investor Forum, and people were bashing on me so hard. Like, I've never been that bashed by fellow pharmacists and healthcare providers, and these are supposed to be people who want to help people. And I was just like really shocked. And at first I took it personally, and I'm just like, maybe sometimes they're just projecting your insecurities, and I get it. Like, there's a lot of other pharmacists, they see me and they're just like, man, like, just hearing about my success, it just makes them feel bad about themselves, and that's nothing I can do, right? But it comes with the territory, right? If I can attract the 1 or 2 people where I help inspire, it's worth it. Like if I inspire one or two people and have 10 people shit on me, that just comes with the territory. And um, so for me, I don't really take it personally. And kind of another thing that I learned is you can't have the highs and the lows. So like when I close on an apartment complex, I'm completely the same at this point. Like if I close on a 50 unit apartment complex, tomorrow, or got one under contract, I'm exactly even keel. Or if somebody, just wrote something bad about me on social media, I'm exactly the same, right? So I'm pretty like stoic to the highs and the lows. I'm just even keel and I'm focused on the process. Um, so for me, I'm more process oriented. And then another thing that I had to do was detach my self worth and my identity from real estate. Like, and that was hard to do because a big part of my identity for the past 5 years was real estate, right? Obviously, I scaled to 90 units in like 5 years, which is rapid, while working full time. And I attached my self worth so much to real estate that if someone bashed on my real estate, I took it like personally, right? But then later when I realized that, you know what, I'm not, I like real estate, but ultimately I wanted the freedom and the options to just be able to leave my day job. Like I think that's ultimately it. And real estate was just the vehicle that I chose to do it in. So once I kind of realized that my identity isn't real estate per se, I'm just maximizing real estate so that I can have options, which is my ultimate goal. So that's kind of the mindset I've had recently, to kind of help me brush things off and not take it personally. I had owners say like, "Hey, F you, stop calling me. Why are you sending me a letter?" It's anything, right? You see anything, and I'm used to it, right? I work in a hospital. I see people at their worst, and you just happen to be there, and people are angry and frustrated, and they take it out on you. I'm just used to it, right? So you just don't take it personally, and try to come from a place of empathy and understanding. A CRM, and do you track my leads? So it, it sounds kind of stupid and simple, but I use calendar app on my phone. I just put like a Google calendar reminder on my phone to say, follow up with this owner in like 2 weeks. That's literally it. And then I'll have like an Excel document, a Google Sheets, where I'll put the address, I'll put the owner's name, what we talked about, and when to follow up. So, it's not complicated. You don't need anything fancy, especially if you're just doing it for yourself. It's that simple. Just Google Sheets or even your calendar, and just creating that system so you don't forget and follow up. And like I said, a lot of these owners are not very motivated, and I don't spend as much time with them, to be honest. It's just the ones where I felt like I got a good response with, and those are the ones I'd follow up on with. So it might just be like maybe 1 to 2 a month, if at all. So it's pretty manageable, just by yourself. So, everything I do, it's catered towards working professionals, right? Like that's how I built my real estate portfolio while working full time, still do it, full time while owning 90 units. So, great question there. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, no questions. I guess I can kind of share a little bit. It's interesting. So I don't, with real estate, my mindset kind of shifted pretty drastically, I'd say, in the past couple months. I would say probably like of July of 2022. And what kind of shifted my mindset was, obviously I got really, really stressed out between doing my job. I'm renovating about 13 of 26 units in my 26 unit apartment complex. I'm renovating about 10 of 20 in my 20 unit apartment complex. And I probably renovated around like 20 mobile homes in my mobile home park, like all simultaneously while working full time. And, these past kind of 5 to 6 months, like it was the first time where real estate became stressful for me. Like before, I was never really stressed by real estate. I was never really stressed by money. And the past like 5 to 6 months was the first time I was stressed about money and stressed about real estate. And During moments of great stress, that's when your brain kind of switches over to like hyper learning mode. So you start to get clarity about like what you really want out of real estate and what's the best way to go about buying real estate. And my kind of realization was, number one, you don't need as much real estate as you think to basically be financially free to leave your W 2, right? So I own 90 units right now, and trying to sell, a mobile home park and probably cut me down to 50 units, but just 50 units, stabilized, they own for 10 years. I mean, to be honest, you average around, let's just call it 2,000 or $200 a month in cash flow per unit. That's $10,000 a month. I mean, that easily replaces my day job, and that's just like in 5, to 10 years. And imagine if you own it like 20 years, it just going the rents go up and up. So that's number one. And number two is don't like kind of chase a unit number. A lot of people in real estate fall into the trap, and I fell into the trap too of like, oh, I want to own like 1,000 units because it sounds cool to say on like forums and like podcasts and on YouTube. That's what a lot of syndicators do. But at the end of the day, these syndicators, they might own like 2% of 1,000, which is what, like 20 units. So I mean, I own 90 units already. That's more than that. And you just, have to deal with these investors. And to me, that just doesn't really sound appealing to me. I'd rather I do real estate for freedom. And so that was kind of one point of clarity. And the second point of clarity that I got was basically real estate's a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm guilty of this. And I think a lot of real estate investors are guilty of this, is that they just want to sprint as hard as they can and buy as much real estate as they can, and then create a huge mess for them that becomes very stressful, right? And I'm a prime example. I bought 80 units of real estate in an 8-month span, and all of them are value add. And for that 8 months period, I was writing probably on average $100,000 a month of renovations amongst all my properties. And even though you have the money set aside, just the psychology of writing $100,000 checks, which is like more than most people make in a year, take home every month for 8 months, it messes with your psychology a little bit, right? I'm not used to that. Even though I had the money set aside, you're just not prepared for that. So, I kind of came to the clarity of, at this point, I need to sell my mobile home park and then wait for my 2 apartments to finish. And then once all 3 of those are done, which may take all of 2023, so I may not be able to buy in 2023. Once that's all done, then I can buy another apartment complex, right? So that's what I'm waiting for. So that's kind of one point. Another point of clarity was basically scaling around. You want to keep your real estate portfolio as simple as possible, because just the fact of owning 90 units of real estate makes it complicated, right? So I had 2 apartment complexes in Oklahoma and 1 mobile home park in Alabama. So I'm managing like 3 different property managers, right? So that's complicated, and this needs to be. So, what I want to do is sell my mobile home park and then take that money and invest in Oklahoma, where I already have property managers, and scale there. And it's easier, right? I just talked to 1 property manager, and they'll know like 2 or 3 of my properties. So it's just 1 phone call, and I can talk about 3 properties. Versus right now, I need 1 phone call per property times 3 properties. So it just gets. And imagine I own like 10 properties one day, and I talk 10 different property managers. That's just not sustainable. I'd rather talk to 1 person, all about all 10 properties, like once a month. So, I kind of said it in my last week, but simple scales, fancy fails. Right? That was a key lesson that I took. So, like, don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple, because it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that kind of hit hard to me kind of recently. And another one too is really, I think that my next apartment, I might upgrade to like a B class, because for me, I don't need, you want good assets with good tenants, because if you're going to own this for 10 years, it's better in the long run, right? So that's kind of my next evolution that I'm thinking already. Like, I want to buy a little bit of a nicer apartment complex in a nicer area of Oklahoma City, to basically scale up and upgrade, right? So I'm doing C-class apartment complex right now. In my next batch, I want to do B, and maybe I'll go to A, right? It's just a very natural progression there. So I see Ivan's question. Do you want to ask the question, Ivan, or is it just in the comments? It's just in the comments.
In the comments, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the stress. I mean, the stress, yeah, basically came from writing $100,000 checks for 8 months straight. Obviously with renovations, you're always going to run into problems. The two problems I run into is, or everyone runs into, is it's going to take longer than you expect. It's going to cost more than you expect. And, there's always things that can happen more. Like I only, like for my 20 unit, I only expected to renovate 5 units out of the 20, but I ending up renovating 10 units out of 20. And my hard money loan is due in May of this year. Right. So I'm up against the wall where I need to like renovate these units and rent them out to get to 90% occupancy to get to refinance out of the hard money loan. So I'm up against the wall at this point. Like 3 months, about 3-4 months left to get that. And in terms of risk of losing the properties, so no, I'm not in risk. And what I teach the students is you need to buy the property right with equity day one, right? So I bought my 26 unit. I made $250,000 of equity day one. So even if I pumped in $200,000 into renovation and I just sold it at the appraised price, I'd still make $50,000 after fees and might break even, right? So that's your safety net one. And safety net number two is you want the ability to raise the rents through renovations so that you can force appreciation. So I have instant appreciation day one, instant equity day one, and also have the ability to force appreciation when you buy the apartment. So my 26 unit, I got it for $500,000. It appraised at 750,000. When I'm done with it, it's gonna be worth $1.5 million. Right. So like my worst case scenario is, I could probably sell it for $750,000 and just break even. I'm probably putting around $200,000 worth of renovation. So you have to buy right, and it's most important, especially right now, right? Like you need to buy right in this market with higher interest rates. Like it's a need. If you can master that, you can't lose with real estate. That's why I like it, right? And then in terms of cash flow, like yeah, when you're renovating units, you're always gonna be negative, right? Like if I'm spending $10,000 per unit and I'm renovating 2 units per month, that's $20,000. Even if I get $10,000 in rents, or I think I'm getting around maybe 7-8,000. Most of that goes to the expense right there, so you're kind of breaking even, but you're still pumping $20,000 a month for renovation. So honestly, if you're doing value add real estate, you're going to be negative until you finish renovating all the units and then rent it out, and that might take like 2 to 3 years depending on your contractor and how fast you can rent it out. So what I'm kind of learning of multifamily is that you're going to break even or be negative for about 2 or 3 years. But then after 2 or 3 years, you're going to make so much money that you can probably leave your job. With single family, you might be vacant for like 2 months. And after renovation and you rent it out, you'll be making like maybe, $300 a month in cash flow. It's great, but $300 is not going to make you leave your job, right? What was that? The price of eggs, and it gets you a couple dozen eggs at this point. So, you just really have to be patient, and it hit me hard. Like if you asked me in 2021 that I own 90 units, I'm saying I'm retired, but I got humbled that I'm still working and my apartments need time to stabilize and break even, because it's almost like you're chasing your tail. Like I renovate 2 units and I rent them out, and then 2 more tenants leave. And then now I have to renovate those 2 units and rent those 2 units out. So it's like you're chasing yourself. Like, okay, I went from 10 to 12, and then 2 left, so I'm back to 10. Then renovate those 2, I'm back to 12, and then another 2 leave, back to 10. You're just chasing yourself until everything's almost renovated. So, that's kind of the struggle that I'm going through right now. But as long as you can kind of share the story with your lender, that's how you basically kind of win or share the story. So that's just kind of expectations. Like I listen to so many podcasts and YouTube videos, and no one is as blunt and transparent as me. Like everyone makes it seem very rosy, very nothing can go wrong. It's not stressful, it's easy, but they're trying to sell you a product, right? They want you to give them money as a syndicator. They want you to invest. They want you, whatever it is. For me, I'm reverse. I'll tell you that it's going to suck for like 2 3 years. You're going to be stressed doing it for 2 3 years. But if you can suck it up for 2 3 years, it's life changing, right? I call it kind candor. I'm just brutally honest. So your expectations are set. But if you can do it and deal with it, it'll change your life. That's bottom line, right? It's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. Um, you know, with real estate. So that's what kind of slapped me a bit. And I've worked with mentors and all that, and they never set expectations that straight either, right? I had to do it, learn just by experiencing it. So that's just kind of something I've been going through recently. Great question. Any other questions from anybody?
Hey, sorry guys, I just got here. I know I'm super late. Steven, thanks. I just want to say I appreciate you for being so consistent in putting out content about this topic because it's important to me. Um, I'm just curious, since I have the time with you here, what drives you?
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of missed it earlier, but I said that, like, obviously putting myself out there, I get a lot of stuff thrown at me, just by nature of it. But like just your comment, like that drives me. Like literally, like just one person saying, "Hey, I appreciate like what you've done," and you kind of helped give me some clarity. Like that's literally it. Breaking down to it, and for me, like I'm tired. Like I work 8 hours, I commute 2 hours, and I come back, and honestly, these sessions give me energy. Like I came in tired, I finished my session more energetic than I was.
Yes,
And I had like
that's so cool.
I had a long day of work. So, for me, it's really just being able to inspire people because, I listen to Bigger Pockets. I'm trying to get into Bigger Pockets. And, unfortunately, you don't see people, like me on Bigger Pockets. Um,
Yeah,
Maybe I don't fit their demographic. So I just kind of felt obligated to, share my story. And, to be honest, I own more real estate than most of the people on the podcast episodes. If you look at it, anything recent, but they don't highlight, Asian Americans as much. Maybe that's not their
yeah,
demographic, and I get it. I'm not going to cry about it. So I just said, well, I'll just create my own content and attract people who like my story and it inspires them. That's my goal at the end of the day. And if I have the privilege of going on one day, great. If not, it's okay. So for me, it's just really teaching my journey and helping others get there because I know how life changing it is, and just sharing my journey in a very transparent way that's realistic and candid. Um, I feel like that's what I can do because I feel like there's no one out there that does that, despite all these YouTubers that have a lot more followers and a larger following than me, but they're not sharing the stuff that I'm sharing. So I just
mm,
kind of felt obligated for that. But the other thing that kind of drives me too is just kind of options. To be honest, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I just want the option to, eventually leave my day job, right? Like I still work full time pharmacy director, and who knows, I might have 90
yeah,
units of real estate. Maybe I'm making $10,000 a month in positive cash flow, but I love my job and I'll continue working. But it's my choice to work, right? Like right now, I have to work. I have no choice
right,
but to work. But later in like, 5 to 10 years, if I have kids or something, I want the option to maybe cut down to part-time, cut down to, per diem, be a consultant, or, this blows up. I'll do this all day. I can do this every day, 8 hours a day, to be honest. If I have,
yeah,
if I have an audience who's willing to ask me questions, I can do this all day. Like seriously, this is not even work for me. So it's just kind of the options to do that. But you just have to suck it up, right? Like in 10
right,
years, I'll tell people I worked full-time W-2 while owning 90 units for 10 years before I left my day job. That's what it takes, right? You have to eat it. You have to put in the work. So That's what kind of drives me, I'd say, to this point. And realistically, real estate's a lonely endeavor. I will say, like, when I can't share with my friends and family about how much real estate I own, because the first thing they think is they'll feel bad about themselves. That's like a protective mechanism, right? Because we grew up in the same high school, we went to the same college, we went to the same pharmacy school. How come you own 90 units of real estate and I'm just struggling to buy my first home to live in, right? Like, it just doesn't make them
Yeah.
feel good, and they're projecting the insecurities against you. Like, oh, you're arrogant, you're cocky, how dare you do this, right? So it's a very lonely
Right.
profession, and it comes with the territory, right? I get it. Like, no one's gonna understand me, no one can relate with me. So realistically, like, if you see me in public, or if you see me in social settings outside of this, I don't really talk much about real estate. I'll talk vaguely about it, but I don't say like I own 90 units, because it's
I
totally
see.
unrelatable. So for me, it's just creating a community where I want everyone in this channel to literally own apartment complexes and buying apartment complex, that the conversation of owning apartment complex is normal. That's what I want, right? That
Yeah.
if everyone owned an apartment complex but Isaac doesn't, you're gonna feel out of place that you don't own an apartment complex. That's the community I want to create, right? Versus right now in the outside world, the fact that I own an apartment complex, I'm weird. I'm an outlier, right? But that's
Yeah.
what it takes to be the 1%. That 99% of the world's not gonna understand you, and that's what we get to deal with, right? Um, if my classmates see me in like 10 years retired, not doing anything, like, how do you do that? Well, I put my head down and grinded for 10 years straight, you know? Um, you know, so it is lonely. It is lonely at the top. And no one will care about your success in your immediate friends and family circle. And you can scream at the top of your lungs, real estate's the greatest thing. Believe me, I've done it. I give out my course to my friends and close friends and family for free, and they don't even like look at it. I'm like, man, like, people pay for this stuff, and I'm giving it to you for free, but that's just not their interest. And that's my intent with the course, is to pass it down to my kid one day. And the same with my social media. Like, I want my kids to like watch it one day and learn about my
Yeah.
mindset and how I was thinking down the road. And hopefully one kid of my kid likes real estate, will create an empire. But if not, then we'll probably have to sell it all and then whatever, right? But
Yeah.
that's kind of my why. So hope that answers there, Isaac.
Yeah, it does. Thank you for sharing that, Steven. I appreciate it, man. I just followed you on Instagram. I'm gonna do a little stalkings on social media and connect with you there. So, again, thank you for creating the space for us. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. No, thanks for hopping on. And yeah, I post daily on all social media platforms at this point. And then just trying to document my journey about like what I'm going through. So I'm doing quite a bit, obviously, managing 90 units of real estate. So it's very easy for me just to create content like without even planning it. So I'm fortunate on that end. Ivan, so your question is B class properties over C class for my next project. Yeah, so C class, it's very renovation intensive, as I alluded to. Like, you're gonna have to renovate, like my 26 unit, I have to renovate, at least half of it. And over the life of the property, probably all the units, to be honest. So it takes around like 2 or 3 years to stabilize it and have it cash flow after you do a cash out refinance. But with B class apartment complexes, they're already pretty new, right? So B class would be like in maybe early 2000s. It's 2023 now. And so, like, you don't really need to renovate them, and maybe you just have to, like, just organically raise the rents and make sure it's filled. So it's a lot simpler. And you just kind of want to slightly diversify what you own, right? Like, you want to have some C class where it's kind of the bigger renovation projects. And once you renovate the C class, you're not gonna have much maintenance, right? Like, if I renovate all 26 of my units, they're all good, right? Because I renovate everything, new floor, new kitchen, rip out the drywall, look at electrical, plumbing, everything's good. So you don't have to worry about it for another 10 to 15 years unless your tenant trashes it, right? If they trash it, you can't control, a little bit. You can't control that, but other than that, it's good. So that's the upside of C class and doing renovation. But B class, it's just kind of like a nice supplement, where, like, if you're doing a heavy renovation project over here, you want a nice B class where maybe you don't have to spend as much time and effort with renovations, that you're just doing natural rent raises, renewing leases, and just basic rent readies. So you have a more stabilized, nicer unit. You're going to pay more for it, unfortunately. And you're not going to force as much appreciation, but it's going to be a lot more passive, like relative to the C class. So, it's just kind of adding to the portfolio. It really depends what stage I am in. Like, obviously, if I'm doing like a huge mobile home park turnaround, then I want an apartment complex that's like turnkey and easy, right? If I don't have a mobile home park big deal going on, then at that point I may want um to do a C class, right? Or it just might depend what the deal comes at, right? Like if I have a good C class deal come to me, or I'm buying it with $200,000 of equity day one, I'm not going to say no to that deal, right? But kind of my vision, at least right now, is to get like a 40-50 unit B class, and it's going to cost me more money. It's probably going to be like $70K per unit, so it's going to be $3.5 million. So that's just kind of my mindset right now, but it just really depends what deals come out there when I start advertising. But I'm gonna be a lot more open to it, because I just kind of want to focus on quality versus quantity in terms of apartments. So that's just kind of why I want to focus on B class. And like a lot of investors, they naturally progress. They go from C class, they sell their C class, they go to B class, and eventually they go to A class, because A class tenants, like where I live, it's an A. Well, it's not A class, but I consider myself an A class tenant. Like I literally pay an auto pay on the first of every month. So, like just today, it drafted from my bank account. Like these are the type of tenants you want, right? Versus like C class, you might have to like knock on their door and get a money order. It's just a different demographic that you're dealing with. And I think as you start to scale more and more, you just want that demographic to be easier so you can own more units. But if you're just investing for yourself, like me, maybe you only need 100 units, and it's fine to own 100 C-class apartment complexes, right? So it just really depends. And I try not to project too far. Like I set 6-month goals. Have a YouTube video about that coming out soon. Actually, like I used to think too far into the future, and it made me unhappy, because I kept on thinking about like, like for some reason I wanted to retire at 35. I'm 32, turning 33 soon. And for some reason, I was still fixated on retiring at 35 with $20,000 a month in positive cash flow. And because I didn't hit that, or I'm not going to hit it, it just made me so like unhappy. And I was just like, why? Like, why am I setting this arbitrary limitation on myself and making me unhappy? So I just said, forget thinking about 35. Let's just think for the next 6 months. Like, what can I do in the next 6 months? And then I'm going to reevaluate my goals in the next 6 months to see what I did, what I didn't do, and what I want to change about my goals. So I kind of pivoted to that mindset now, and it gave me a lot more, I'd say, mental peace recently. So that's just kind of why I'm doing that. Great question there. Any other questions that I have from the audience? Don't be shy. Okay. I'll just kind of end on, kind of one last thought. And, for me, I don't really look at the market conditions. Like, there's a lot of news, a lot of like YouTube videos, a lot of news articles and headlines talking about like, oh, the real estate recession, it's going to crash. Interest rates are going up. I think they just announced today that interest rates went up by 0.25%. And I just feel like people are so absorbed on like just reading the news and consuming content, and they're not like taking action. So for me, I don't really pay attention to that. Like if it's a good deal, I don't care what the interest rates are. I don't care what the market conditions are. If I'm buying a good deal of instant equity day one, I don't really care, right? Like my 20 unit, I have a hard money loan at 9% interest only. And when I do my cash out refi in May to August, like interest rate might be 7-8%, right? And to me, it's whatever. Like I may not be able to pull out as much money as I thought, right? Let's just say the ARV is $800,000. I bought it for $350,000. I put $100,000 into it. So I'm all in for $450. And whatever, let's say it's worth $800,000 and they only allow me to pull out, maybe like 60% loan to value or, 70% loan to value instead of like 80% loan to value. That just means I pull out less money. That's fine, right? Like to me, if I can pull out any money that I get back, that to me, that's a cherry on top, right? Like my point is I want to own assets and force appreciation, get cash flow. If I can pull out any money I can, it's a cherry on top. And obviously the interest rates are higher, you pull out less money. If the interest rates are like 4%, I can pull out a lot more money, right? So if you're just gonna have that mindset, and it's okay, right? Like whatever, I pull out, let's just say only a little my down payment for my 20 unit, and then another 5 years when I cash out refinance again, I can pull out the rest of my money plus some, right? You just have to wait a little bit longer to get your money if the interest rates go down. So I'm pretty like stoic to all the news and all the interest rates. Like if you just can find a good deal, and the only thing I like about the news is that it makes the sellers scared because they want to unload the property because they feel like the property values might go down. So they might be more motivated in this market. So actually, I'm in a weird way more excited about the headlines, not for me, but the fact that the owners are reading it and they're scared. And that fear makes them more motivated to want to sell and want to work with you. So, that's why I'm kind of sad that I can't buy any right now because I'm waiting for my assets to stabilize. But I'm very like I would love to like send letters in this market right now and get these deals down because there's gonna be a lot more motivated sellers, and they're gonna want higher price, buyer market or seller market prices, but it's becoming a buyer's market, and that's where creative financing kind of bridges that gap. And because I understand and know how to leverage and pitch seller creative financing, I know I can make a killing without much money out of pocket, right? But I just hit my mental capacity of owning enough real estate. So, I wish I could be, active in this market right now. I just can't. So I'm kind of living vicariously through my students who are sending letters and analyzing deals. So that's just kind of the last point I wanted to have. And if no other questions, thank you everyone for hopping on. And this session is recorded, uploaded to YouTube shortly. So you can rewatch it there. I probably have like 25 sessions uploaded at this point, talking about various topics. If there's a topic you want me to discuss next week, just shoot me an email. You can make a comment there. But at the end of the day, like I said, I just wanted to discuss topic and give value and answer questions with you guys to, hopefully inspire you to get your first deal, whether it's single family apartment complexes. And yeah, hope to see everyone on the next call. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.